How many of you have so much peace in your life that there isn't room for more? I've asked that as a therapist, as an educator, as a speaker. I've asked that question to thousands of people, and nobody has ever raised their hand. Well, except for one dude. He rose his hand. He's like, yeah, dude, I totally have so much peace in my life. I don't have room for more. And I think he was high. Because nobody else raises their hand, and it's easy to understand why. The world is in turmoil. And what is it that prevents us from having more peace and joy and love in our lives? Well, it's a 4-letter word that I am allowed to say in a TED Talk: pain. And the world is in turmoil. Wars, rumors of wars, political backstabbing, environmental concerns, healthcare shortages, epidemics around the world, families falling apart, mental health concerns. Every 29 minutes in the United States, somebody completes suicide or dies of an overdose. So it's not very hard to look very far to see that there is a lot of pain in this world. And among all of that pain, all of the different things that I've mentioned, and so many more, there is something that even causes more pain. As humans, we are wired for connection. Neurologically, biologically, socially, spiritually, energetically, we are wired to be connected. And when something happens that breaks those connections or damages those relationships, that can cause some of the most excruciating pain that we have ever felt in our lives. I call that kind of pain, those kind of wounds, attachment wounds. And there are 6 of them: loss, neglect, rejection, abandonment, betrayal, and abuse. And when these things happen to us, they get stuck in our bodies, and they are trauma experiences that sometimes never heal. And they're like sunburns. How many of you have ever gone to the beach and you forgot to put sunblock on? And so you are beet red. But you have to go to work the next day. You still have a life to live. You have things to do. And so the next morning you wake up and you take some ibuprofen to help numb the pain, and then you gingerly put your clothes on, because it is recommended that you wear clothes to work. And then you walk into the building and you have this invisible wall up. You're like, don't you touch me. Don't you come anywhere near me. I do not want you to touch my sunburn. But then Bob from accounting, he comes up from behind you and he says, hey, how was the beach? And I'm like, gosh, that hurts so bad. And you immediately pull away, or you want to push him away because it hurts so bad. Well, that's what happens when somebody accidentally bumps up against one of our attachment wounds. And so we find a way to protect ourselves to make sure that that never happens again. The question that I've been asking myself for a long time is, how do we experience more peace and joy and love in our lives when we have attachment wounds? Is it possible to have both? And I found part of the answer in one of the most interesting of places, the hospital. About 20 years ago, I was a medical social worker. And part of my job was to go in and talk to patients and see what they needed so that they could go home. So I might set them up with home health or physical therapy or get them a walker or something. And then I'd have to go write down what I had done for that person. Well, this was long before the day of the electronic medical record. And so I'd have to flip through a bunch of pages to get to the part where I'm supposed to do my job. And sometimes when I was flipping through those pages, I would stumble upon pictures of patients' wounds, and they were gnarly. I remember one patient in particular had a tunneling wound that was about 3 inches in diameter on the small of his back. It was so big that you could literally reach your fist into his body 2 to 3 inches. And the nurses were really concerned. In fact, they even called in wound care nurses to help figure out what could we do to create an environment so his body could close that wound. Because if they couldn't figure out how to help his body heal, the consequences could be lethal. Similarly, if we don't figure out how to heal our attachment wounds, the consequences can be just as lethal. But I learned something else along the way. It's not just the wound. In fact, it isn't even the wound that causes us suffering. It's what we've come to believe about ourselves as a result of the wound. I'm in the 9th grade. I am standing outside of Mr. Rice's room. It is 3 p.m., the school bell has rung, all the kids are getting the stuff out of their lockers and shoving them in their backpacks and getting ready to go off to wherever they need to go. And I am standing frozen in front of his room. Earlier that day, they had made an announcement that if anybody wanted to try out for track and field, all they needed to do was go to Mr. Rice's room. He's the track and field coach. And when I heard the announcement, I thought to myself, I can run fast. I know I can run fast because for the last 3 years, every day in gym in middle school, I have been bullied. The boys would stand around me and tease me and call me names that I am not allowed to say in a TED Talk. And then sometimes these boys would wait for me after school and they would try to beat me up. And so I learned how to run really fast. So I knew I could do it. But something happened between 9 a.m. when the announcement was made and 3 p.m. as I'm standing in front of Mr. Rice's room. The shadows of shame showed up. That's what I call them anyway. Those voices in our head that tell us things that are not very nice. They said things to me like, what are you doing here? Why are you, what, you think you're gonna go in there? You are gonna make a fool of yourself. You can't run fast. You've never played sports a day in your life. What the heck do you think you are doing? You're dumb. You're stupid. Oh my gosh, do you see the calves on that guy? That guy has some amazing calves. Do you see your legs? They're like toothpicks, dude. You weigh 75 pounds soaking wet and you're this tall. You are not gonna be able to compete with them. Do you remember when you were in elementary school and they did that team captain thing and they would pick kids to be on their team and you were always picked last? Well, this is gonna be worse because you are gonna be the one and only kid in the entire history of your high school that was not picked for track and field. Don't humiliate yourself like that. Don't go in there. This is going to be bad. Go home. And so I turned around and I walked away. And I never went in to Mr. Rice's room. I've been asked the question, if you could go back in time and change one event in your life, where would you go and what would you change? Well, I know exactly where I would go. I would go back to that moment and walk in to Mr. Rice's room because not doing so, those stories that I was not enough and that I didn't have what it takes followed me for a very long time. Unfortunately, I do not have a time machine. I do not have a DeLorean that goes 88 miles an hour with a flex capacitor, and so I cannot go back to my high school. But about 6 months ago, I did have the opportunity to go back to my high school for my 30th high school reunion. And as we were touring the high school, consequently with some of those same boys that had been bullies back in the day, I snuck away from the crowd and I went back and stood in front of Mr. Rice's room. And I imagined seeing my younger self standing there with fear in his eyes and shame on his face and wounds that hurt. And I said to him, Troy, I see you. I see your wounds of rejection and abandonment and abuse. And I know they hurt. And I know they're painful. And I know that you don't believe in yourself very much. I want you to try something with me for a minute. I want you to imagine a younger version of yourself standing in front of you right now. And can you see your younger self's wounds? Does your younger self have wounds of loss or neglect or abandonment or of betrayal or of rejection or of abuse? And can you imagine seeing that younger self with their pain and saying to him or her, hey, I see you. I see your pain. I see your hurt. Is there a message of love and compassion that you would like to say to your younger self right now? Is there something that your younger self needs to hear that could help wrap that wound up a little bit? I want you to think about what that message might be, and I want you to say it to your younger self out loud right now. And then I want you to lean over to the person sitting next to you and say it to them too, because chances are they could really use hearing it too. The way that we heal attachment wounds is through compassion and connection. And as I saw my younger self, I imagined putting my hands on his face and putting my hand on his heart and saying, Troy, oh, Troy, I love you. I see your wounds. I see that they hurt. I see that you're scared. You are enough whether or not you go into Mr. Rice's room. And in fact, some of the very wounds that you have are going to help you help others heal their wounds. I'm proud of you. You have what it takes. The way we heal attachment wounds is through compassion and connection. When we wrap our wounds up with love and we reach out for others, a beautiful thing happens. My willingness to be transparent and vulnerable increases, and I put those walls down that I've been using to try and protect myself. And in doing so, I can see you more clearly. And as your light shines, and as my light shines, the shadows of shame fade away. And our capacity to connect is powerful. And when that happens, healing happens for me and for you and for our families and for organizations and ultimately for a wounded world. And for me, that is an idea worth spreading.